CashFlow Diary Podcast, episode 344.
Welcome to yet another exciting episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast, the podcast that teaches you insider tips, tactics, and strategies for creating leverage streams of cash flow into your life. Learn from top-performing entrepreneurs, business owners, investors, and thought leaders from across the globe as they share their secrets to success. Like what you learn on this and other CashFlow Diary podcast episodes? Go to learninvestingnow.com and sign up to receive powerful tips and information that will help you succeed as an entrepreneur and investor. Now, here's your host, investor, entrepreneur, business owner, educator, speaker, author, and master facilitator of Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow game, Jay Massey.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the CashFlow Diary Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Massey, and I'm glad that you're here today because we're going to delve into a subject that I know most of you don't want to. In fact, I've heard this phrase before, and I think you may have too. I have heard it said that a partnership is the only ship designed to sink. So what does that mean? That means when we are out there doing business, oftentimes we need to leverage the resources of other people. You've got to work together. But how do you do it? How on earth do you come to a successful, keyword, negotiation and actually have all the parties be happy about it? But what happens when it goes wrong? Is there anything that you could do to prepare yourself so that it goes as best as possible from the beginning? And how can you even tell if there are warning signs that your ship is about to sink? Well, I happen to have with me today the founder of the American Negotiation Institut. That's code for we're going to learn answers to all of those things today. He's none other than Kwame Christian. He's a business lawyer, and he's passionate about teaching entrepreneurs and business professionals like you and I the art, notice it's art, not science, of negotiations so that we can get better deals and advance our career. He's here to say it's possible, and not just possible, but for you and I today, he's going to make it more probable. So let us listen. Let's take some notes as we all learn together today from Mr. Kwame Christian. How you doing, sir?
Good. Thanks for having me on the show.
I'm glad that you are here because you are dealing with a tough subject, my friend. I don't even understand how you wake up and go, yeah, I want to do that. But we're going to get to that in a minute. So this being your first time here, I've got to ask you the same question I tend to ask everybody, because I tend to look at today's entrepreneurs a lot like yesterday's superheroes, you know, Batman, Robin, Wonder Woman, etc. You get the idea. Mm-hmm. And you are clearly one of the entrepreneurs. And I think entrepreneurs and superheroes have a ton of things in common. For example, we use our special abilities, our super skills, if you will, to improve the quality of life of our customers, etc. However, at the same time, before we, realized our superpower, we were kind of just normal. I mean, if you think about it, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, he was out there just going to school, doing his thing, taking some photos, gets bit by a spider, and then suddenly, boom, Spider-Man. So what we want to know is, before being a lawyer, before founding the Negotiating Institute, before all the things that you are known for today, who is Kwame Christian?
That is a deep question. So I'm a first generation Caribbean American. I was born in New Jersey, and then I grew up in a small town in the middle of nowhere of Ohio called Tiffin. And so for me growing up, it was a bit tough because I was so different from everybody else. I looked different. I sounded very different because I had a strong Caribbean accent then. And so for me, the Kwame beforehand, he was a young kid trying to be accepted. And so I realized that is really the foundation for my my negotiation skills, because really it was mean negotiating acceptance from the jump. And so I was always very keen on how to build rapport, how to build relationships, how to make friends. And I had to focus on it a little bit harder because I was different. And I think that laid the foundation for my interest in psychology and human interaction and human cognition. And then, of course, laid the groundwork for my subsequent interest in negotiation.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So just, you make me wonder how many of us are out there doing something based upon like the fact that something happened when we were younger and we were trying to compensate for it. And that's why we do what we do today. When you bring that up, it's like, it makes me think about that.
Yeah, and I think when we do take some time and do a little bit of introspection and think about the things that make us who we are, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a situation like that. For my wife, she's a family doctor, but she had the opportunity to see a doctor in action through this program back in Akron, and she saw people getting help, and she saw also the people around her not getting the medical attention that they needed. So she wanted to be able to provide medical attention to those people in need. And so now she's a doctor, a family doctor, in serving the underserved neighborhoods in Columbus. And it's a really good thing that you brought that up, because I never thought about it that way. But I think if we look deep enough, we'd find some base for the way we are in our childhood.
I agree. So take us through the journey, because I'm sure you didn't just wake up one day and say, I know, I'll help people deal with the thing they don't want to deal with, negotiating. I mean, I'm just putting it out there because, most people don't want to bring up the subject.
Right. And, it's funny that most people don't want to bring it up because there's really no choice. You have two options. Right. Either you can do it well or you can do it poorly, but you're going to end up doing it. And so my definition of negotiation is any conversation where one or more of the people in the conversation want something. And then when you realize that it's a really broad definition, you see that you're negotiating every day. But to your point, to your question, how did I stumble upon this? My undergrad degree was in psychology because like I said, I liked learning about the way people thought. So I had a psych major, minored in Spanish and foundations of law. And then I was thinking about politics. I wanted to have an impact. I knew I wanted to help people. And I was like, oh, politics, you can help a lot of people. And so I went into law school and got a master's of public policy at the same time. And then as I started to learn more about the political process, I was like, being an elected official would be a horrible experience. Let's not do that. And so I just stumbled across this class, this negotiation class at OSU, at Ohio State. And it turns out Ohio State now, they have the top-ranked dispute resolution program in the country. I didn't know that at the time. And so just took the class and fell in love because I realized that it's the most transferable business skill that we have, because when we go to work, we'll use it. When we come home, we use it. And I learned a skill one day in class, and I was able to implement it successfully at home in a conversation with my wife. And so I was hooked after that. And so they had these negotiations.
Hold on.
Oh, yeah?
Did you just say you were able to successfully negotiate with your wife?
Absolutely.
Oh, Absolutely. You got everybody's attention now. Keep going.
And what you find is that the people that you're closest to are the people you'll end up negotiating with the most. And so that's why I say it's a skill that we need. That's a skill that we need. But
I think I got all the husbands' attentions right now. You're like, what? Keep going, man. They're taking notes.
Yeah. And so I was able to compete in a negotiation competition. So imagine mock trial, but for negotiation.
Okay.
And so my partner and I, we were able to win the competition at OSU, and then we were able to represent the school at a regional competition in Ottawa, Ontario, and we won that competition as well. And then we were able to represent the school at nationals, and we made it to the semis of nationals. And so after that, I was just hooked. I was like, give me more. And so I just couldn't stop learning, and I just kept trying to learn as much as I can and as much as I could, and then decided to jump right in and make this my number one thing.
Interesting. I didn't even know there was a competition for this.
See, neither did I until a few weeks beforehand. I was like, let's do it.
There it is. Okay, so then I guess if I asked you, let's just put it this way. Why does it go wrong for so many so often?
That is a great question. So there's one big reason why negotiations go poorly for people. The big reason is that people don't recognize that they're in a negotiation, because we have this big Hollywood type of mentality when it comes to what a negotiation is, like those situations where we're in a business suit and we're sitting across the table. And if you ask somebody, like, how many times do you think you'll negotiate in your life? They might say, maybe I have like 3 or 4. But the reality is that you probably have 3 or 4 per day. But the thing is, they go past us and we don't recognize it. And when we do recognize that we're in a negotiation, then we can start to implement these techniques and strategies to get more of what we want. And the cool thing about negotiation is that I consider there to be 3 pillars of negotiation. There's an offensive use of negotiation, and that's when you try to get more of what you want. There's a defensive use for negotiation. That's when you try to avoid bad things like expenses and conflict. And then there is a third pillar, which is often forgotten, and that's the ability to strengthen relationships. And no negotiation is successful if you are unable to master that relationship portion. So even if there's no money on the table, even if there's no value to be had, there's always value in the relationship. And you can use these techniques to maximize that value with the other person.
Okay. I think I like where we're headed, but let me ask you this question, because you said the big thing is that we don't realize we're in a negotiation. We think that maybe we're, negotiating 3 to 4 times ever, but you're saying, no, we're doing it 3 to 4 times a day. So what are some of those common things that could be happening to someone right now as they're listening to us, where they're like, oh my God, I just did a negotiation. I didn't even realize it.
Right. Okay. Here's a good example. Oh, this is a really good example. So when I was going back to talking about negotiating with my wife, in December, things are a little bit slow when you're as a lawyer and as a negotiation consultant. People aren't focused on those type of things. They're thinking about holiday stuff. So I'm just focusing on social media, getting my social media in order. So I'm getting all of the quotes from some of my favorite books and some of my interviews I've had on my podcast and loading them into my social media. Mm-hmm. And so it was funny because I was just finishing a quote that talks about we make a lot of mistakes. The fact that we make a lot of mistakes in negotiation because we rush. There's no harm in slowing down in a negotiation. And so then my wife calls me and she's like, hey, Kwame, can you go get the baby and my mom from home and you all could come to this Christmas party at my job? And I was like, and then I thought about the quote I just read. I was like, wait, you know what? Give me a second. Let me call you back. Let me think about this. And so I said, listen, we both know that her mom is chronically late to things and she's not as quick. And I want to get back because I have an interview here at 2 p.m. And so I said, all right, how about this? I could go get Kai, the baby, but then we could leave your mom at home and that'll be faster. She's like, okay, that works. And, most of the time we would see that interaction as a zero-sum type of deal. Here's the offer, take it or leave it. But then if you think about it, think about your interests, think about what you want, think about what the other person wants, and see if there's a creative way to make both of your lives a little bit easier. So that's a good example of something that just happened in the last couple of hours.
No doubt. So, okay, then if I'm hearing you correctly, what you're really saying is oftentimes when we might be experiencing, I'll call it heightened emotion, that's probably a sign that we're in the middle of a negotiation that we're unprepared for. And the best thing to do is to take a moment.
Exactly. And that's the thing about negotiation. Hollywood makes it seem like persuasion is just easy and it has to come from somebody that's really charismatic. And that's not true. It has to come from somebody who's really prepared. And when you're not prepared, you need to take the time. And so, for instance, if I'm having a 10-minute call, I might prepare for about 45 minutes for that call because I know that there's value to be had and I don't want to leave any of it on the table. And so that's why I give out the free negotiation prep guide to all of my listeners. And so maybe this is a good time to mention it. So I have if you go to AmericanNegotiationInstitute.com/prep, PREP, you can download a free negotiation prep guide that can help you prep for these everyday conversations and the big ones too.
Every day. Well, as real estate investors, business owners, and just general people, what you're telling me is that there's probably not an hour we don't negotiate something. So it sounds like that's something I'm absolutely going to need. What would you say then? Because you started speaking about the pillars, and I really want to unpack that and understand more. What do you mean when you say offensive, defensive, and strengthening the relationship? What is the offensive way to use negotiation?
So imagine if you're selling a piece of property.
Imagine? Yes, that's easy for me to imagine. Yes, I can imagine that. Thank you. That was hard.
Good. Step one complete.
Yeah, totally.
And so your goal is to try and get as much as you can out of that. And so there are different negotiation strategies and techniques that you can employ to make sure you can generate as much revenue as you can from that transaction. Now, again, this will be tough. Imagine if you're buying a piece of property, then that's when you would rely on pillar number 2, which is the defensive use of negotiation. And you want to save on expenses. You want to try and get that price as low as possible. And then the third pillar, which should always exist, is strengthening relationships. You want to have this conversation in a way that the person feels respected, feels valued, and feels appreciated throughout the process. Because in the majority of these negotiations, it's not going to be a one-shot deal. These relationships are going to go on forever. And even if there is a clear deadline to it where you will never see this person again, you still want to focus on the relationship because your reputation is important. Your reputation in and of itself is persuasive. And so you never want to lose the value that you have in the reputation. So you want to treat everybody with respect and focus on that pillar number 3 every time you're in a negotiation.
Got it. So I'm curious to hear how you can, I think it's somewhat intuitive, asking for more of what you want. But of the 3 pillars, what do you find to be the most difficult or least used?
I think it's easiest for people to forget the third pillar, even though, in my opinion, it's the most important. The thing is, we have this myopic focus on the numbers, especially when we're in business. We're like, how much money am I getting? How much money am I losing? But you have to, in order to be a better negotiator, you have to have a wider perspective on what value is. So value doesn't only come from the fact that you get a good deal on the money. The timing is important. The structure of the deal is important. What is and is not included in the house is important. And of course, the relationship's important. And you want to, in your preparation stage, you want to list all of the things that could be valuable to you and all of the things that could be valuable to the other side. Because creativity, when it comes to creating a deal, is going to be important because you want to find ways that you can satisfy the other person's needs in a way that is cheap for you. You want to trade things of unequal value. And that's how you can really work to create phenomenal deals.
Now, I think I know what you mean, but I want you to explain it so everyone can hear, because you said something that I'm sure somebody heard and was like, what does that mean? You said you want to trade things of unequal value, because we've always heard, and we hear it all the time, and I'm sure someone heard it today, you got to create a win-win situation. And oftentimes we can conflate that to mean things of equal value. But what do you mean by trading things of unequal value?
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because sometimes I can just float through these terms pretty quickly. So let's give the example of me buying my first house with my wife a couple of years ago. So when we were buying this house, we were both in school at the time. We're just coming out of school. So we didn't have that much money. And so the numbers were tight. We were close. We were in range, but we wanted to try and make sure that we could get as much value out of it as possible. So we reached what we felt was a fair deal, and it seemed as though that the other side wasn't going to go any lower, which was understandable. But one of the issues that we were facing is that since we were new and this house was significantly bigger than our last place, was that we didn't have much furniture. So we would move in and there'd be this barren, huge place. And so one of the things that we negotiated was for them to leave a few pieces of furniture that were there just to get us started. And for them, it's like, hey, the lady who lived here before, she's old, she's going into the home. This furniture we don't need, we're going to get rid of anyway. So it is of very little value to us. However, to us, the buyers, it was incredibly valuable. So we were just like, yeah, we would definitely take that because for us, it saved us about probably $1,000 in furniture. And then on their end, it probably saved them the cost of getting rid of the furniture.
Got it. So you're going into these things, and this, I think, is what you mean by being prepared. You were really clear on what you needed, not just to quote unquote win the property or get the deal, but also to make effective use of what it is that you're asking for.
Exactly. And the more creative you get, the more you can work with the other side to actually create value. Because to somebody who is uninitiated, they might just see a house and say, okay, it's a $300,000 house. That is the value that we're dealing with. But then if you work with the other side, you might be able to work together to create a deal that is worth more than $300,000, even though when you sign the dotted line, it only says that it's worth $300,000.
Correct. Okay, I get it. Now, what I thought was interesting about what you just said there is because you bring up this concept of, you reached what you guys believed to be a fair deal. And oftentimes I know, because I get this question, people ask about, comparable sales when it comes to properties and what someone else paid and all these other things. And I often tell people that, a deal is what you pay for it is what it's worth to you, not necessarily what someone else paid for it. I would love to get your thoughts on that as it relates to structuring a deal that makes sense, because oftentimes they can make a purchase and someone else would look at that and go, man, why did you do it that way? I would have done this. And then they start feeling insecure, like they did something wrong or it was the wrong kind of deal.
Exactly. No, that's a great point. And value is relative. Different things have different values. And a good example was, I love Craigslist. I love Craigslist just for fun. And I remember one time we were getting rid of a bunch of pots and pans. And so I just put it up there and I just said, best offer. It's our old pots and pans. Just give us your best offer. And somebody came in and said, hey, I'll pay $40 for that. And so she took the pots and pans. She was ecstatic. It was for her daughter who was going to college. She was really happy about the deal. And then as we were going home, Whitney told me, she's like, I feel kind of bad. They were just our old pots and pans. And I told her, it's like, whatever, if you feel like a deal is fair, then the deal is fair. And the only difference is that when we get into the ethics of negotiation, when we talk about the possibility of manipulation, if you get somebody to take a deal and it will be ultimately detrimental to them as a result of a material fact that you're withholding, then yeah, that is that is unethical. You cross the line there. But if you've given everybody the requisite amount of information that they need to make a savvy decision, then if they feel like it's a good deal, it's a good deal. And that's the thing too. But let's go back to the pots and pans example. Now, let's say if those were my grandmother's pots and pans and she passed away and I really loved her, and somebody comes and says, hey, I'll pay $40 for those pots and pans. It's the exact same pots and pans. But then I say, no way, this is worth at least $300. And then they're like, are you serious? These old pots and pans? But the thing is, to me, intrinsically, it has emotional value. And so it's really difficult to come in and say what the real value is, because it's going to be subjective to each person. And that's why it's so important in these preparation stages, tying it all together, to understand your walkaway point, because then you can operate confidently within the negotiation, knowing what your value is that you've assigned to the thing at issue.
Indeed. And what I hear you saying in that, though, is that your walkaway point is, that too is also relative.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the thing that's going to be key when it comes to becoming a better persuader is realizing that people make decisions first based on emotion, and then they justify those decisions based on logic. And so if you make the mistake of not considering the emotions at play, both in you and the other party, you're going to be missing out on a lot of persuasive tools, number one. And number two, you're going to end up being frustrated because you keep on laying on facts and logic, and you would be frustrated because you're like, why aren't these working? I'm right. But if you focus on who's right and who's wrong, you're going to be really frustrated at the end of the day.
Okay, you are bringing up a number of things because you're telling us to pay attention to the conversations that are happening, and I've often thought that there's a conversation, yes, going on inside of me, conversation going on inside of the person. And in addition to the conversation that's actually happening between the two of us, it's like there's so many parties. Even though two people are present, it's like 4 or 5 conversations are happening all at once. And that's what we somehow got to magically keep track of. You are not making this easier, my friend.
No, and I'm glad. I'm glad because then I have successfully persuaded you that it is that you can't just do that. You can't freestyle these conversations. That's why it's important to take the time and do this analysis. And you think about the multiple people in the negotiation. If it's just two of you, it's you, the other person, and then the schizophrenic parts of ourselves that we need to be debating. We also have to consider the people who aren't at the table who could be deal breakers. Because if my friend calls me and says, "Hey, Kwame, when's a good time to hang out on Saturday?" And I say, "Oh, let's hang out at 3. I got to get home early." And then he's like, "No, no, no, let's hang out at 5." And then we come to an agreement at 4. And then I come home and I say, "Hey, I'm hanging out with Ben at 4." And my wife's like, "We have plans. She could blow it all up."
Totally.
So that's why it's important to not only consider the multiple parts of you at play, the multiple parts of the other person, but also the stakeholders that could also play a role in the decision-making process.
And I'm sure that's never happened. You've never done that. Plans.
Never.
No, never. Not even once. Why would that happen? No. Okay. Now, earlier you brought up something and we went right by it a little faster than I would like. So I want to bring it back up. You mentioned about disclosing information. And this is key because sometimes you want to play your cards close. You don't always want and then some people just they just throw everything right out on the table. It's like,
right.
Here it all is. And you've given up any other leverage or points that you might have. How do you walk that line? How do you know? Are you picking up some good tips? I hope so, because you are probably getting deeper into your own understanding of that. Well, negotiations happen every day, all the time. And you are negotiating something today, whether you realize it or not. Hopefully, this particular episode will give you better clarity so that you can just understand while it's a big deal, it's really not a big deal. It's not the end-all be-all, but it's something that you must become better at and you can practice every day, which gives you the ability, dare I say, to become much, much better. Remember, every master was once a disaster. Hopefully that gives you some hope and you can go out there and negotiate something today. Anyway, if you're looking for more tips on negotiations and the like, feel free to pick up a copy of my book, CashFlow Diary, 10 Steps to Creating Wealth in Any Economy. Just go over to cashflowdiary.com/free book. Again, that's cashflowdiary.com/free book. Let's get back to the rest of this story.
Right. It's here's a classic lawyer response. It depends. It depends. So
there you go.
Let's use an example of this house. So
Sure.
if I bought this house and I did my due diligence, it's incumbent upon the other side to do their own due diligence. You can't do their work for you to a certain extent. But if I know there's a foundation issue, and if they knew that there was a foundation issue that was minor, but my inspector missed it, I feel like that would be a material fact because that would have a serious detrimental effect on the overall value of the house. But here's something that was something that we discovered later that I think wasn't a material fact. This is a shared house. And so there's a family that lives below us, and we live on top. And so it's an old house. It's built in 1936. And so what we've noticed is that the people who live below us, they've smoked for decades, and which is fine. You do that. We don't smell it. That's not the problem. The problem is that because they've smoked for decades and now they're older, now they cough at night, and we hear that. Is that a material fact? No. But it's annoying, but it's not a material fact. So it's just a matter of degree. And I think one of the tests that you can use is you shouldn't use a negotiation tactic or withhold information that you wouldn't feel comfortable disclosing to your friends. Like if you have a friend that is the moral compass of the group, or your mother, or somebody that you respect, and if you told them what you did and they would be disappointed, then I think that's your time that you need to do some self-reflection and make sure that you're doing right by the other side. Because again, you have to consider that third pillar. Because if I discover that you withheld a material fact, our relationship is shot.
Totally. Now, on the other side, though, there are so many points to negotiate. What I do find also that tends to happen, especially when we start practicing creative financing or, any sort of acquisition strategies that involve more detailed negotiations of property or businesses, sometimes we want to try to negotiate all the pieces all up front, from payment patterns to the amount of the payment, the price. What's your thought process on taking it one at a time or just getting it all out there?
Sometimes it's going to be difficult for you to come to an agreement on the whole package, on one issue without seeing the whole package. So I think there is a value at times to approaching things in a linear fashion. However, I think if you do that, one of the things you should be careful of doing is saying, yeah, I think this is something that we can agree to contingent upon the overall deal. I wouldn't feel comfortable locking myself into any line item within the entire deal until I see the overall package. And so one way you can handle this is by providing multiple offers. And so you could provide multiple offers at the same time and change the value based on how you see it. So for instance, you could say this house is worth $300,000, and then we would have the walkthrough on this date, blah, 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 and we'd close on that date. However, if we are able to close on this date, the value of the house, we'd sell the house for $295,000, but blah, blah, blah. And so you change those deals. And so that's a way that you can put something forward, and then you can have a substantive discussion on each issue with the whole, considering the quality of the entire package at the time of the negotiation.
Okay. And this brings up something that's really awesome, because what happens for a lot of first timers, big beginner negotiators, is that they want to try to, they see the property and they're looking at it, and Kwame, man, this is the property as far as they're concerned, right? Mm-hmm. So they're ready to write the offer, but they don't actually get around to doing it because they're trying to get the offer right before they actually write it, and they never really submit anything, but because they want to get it right the first time. So my question to you is, how often does that ever really happen?
As in somebody missing their opportunity because they're trying to make a perfect offer?
That happens a lot. I'm talking about how often does it actually happen when you've seen an offer or this process begin to where what was submitted was actually what was agreed to from the beginning?
Oh, yeah.
The initial version.
It depends. Oh, initial version? It should never happen. That should.
Whoa. Say that again. Say that again.
That should almost never happen.
Yes.
Because then that's not a negotiation. That's just yes or no. That's just a simple proposition. Would you like this? Yes. There should be some back and forth in all of these. And I've never seen the golden deal. So that would be new to me.
I think that deal. It has a name. I like it.
I know. I just made it up, but I'll take credit for it.
Yeah, absolutely. The golden deal. Absolutely. I'm just glad someone else said it, because I keep saying it and nobody listens. So I figured, you're the attorney, so they'll listen to you.
Yeah, you should always push back a little bit. There's the thing about it. Anytime you're an entrepreneur, you have these you have your expenses that you need to make. You have the different costs in the market, and then we have the margin. And really, the margin is a fancy way of saying fluff. How much do we want to make? We make that up. And so if we were to think about these prices are written down in stone, it'll be one of those few things that really are. Think about the times when you drive. When was the last time you ever drove precisely the speed limit when the police weren't present? We stand like the law. That's a law. That's on the books. If you go above 25 into 25, you're actually breaking the law. And so, but we realize that there's fluff in the speed limit. But it's interesting to see that sometimes when it comes to prices and other things that are man-made by civilians, we think that it's written in stone and there's no flexibility. But there almost always is.
I agree with you 1,000%. So let's talk strategy for a moment, because I know one of my favorite things to do. If you haven't picked up on it yet, Kwame, I enjoy this negotiation thing probably more than I should, but it's fun for me. And, I will go to the mall and negotiate for no other reason than because I'm bored. It's like, cool, let's do it. Yeah, I like your sale price, but can you throw in some socks too? Just because. And it's amazing how often you get socks. Okay, that's all I'm just saying. I'm not saying if you need socks, this is what you do. I'm just saying it's amazing what happens if you ask. But from a strategy standpoint, How do you feel? Because one of my favorite things to do is I almost always, that initial offer almost always asks for way more than I actually want.
Mm-hmm.
However, I know a lot of people who will only ask for exactly what they want and nothing more. Where do you fall on that spectrum?
Ask for more. Always. And a quick note, we should come back to this. I like what you said about negotiating in the mall, so I want to come back to that afterwards.
Sure.
But yeah, you should always ask for more, and here's why. You want the offer, the opening offers set the reference point for the negotiation. And so what that means is that that is the point that we will say as this is the beginning, and how far or close we are to that number is how psychologically we'll measure our success. So what you want to do is you want to anchor. And so anchoring is a technique where you ask for more than what you anticipate you could get in order to fall to a lower point that is acceptable. And so this is not just saying, hey, my house is worth $300,000. I'm going to ask for $75 million and see what happens. No, you can't do that. When you anchoring is a very touchy science, but I'll try and break it down as easily as possible. When you use anchoring, you want it to pass the because test. So if I know the fair market value of the house is approximately $300,000, I want to ask for 325, 310, something like that. But if I cannot pass the because test, then it tells me that my offer is legitimate. And so what does that look like? If I can't finish the sentence, I'm asking for $325,000 because XYZ, then it's not a legit offer. So that because might be because a celebrity used to live here, or because the market value on this particular block is going up while across the street is going down, something like that. There needs to be something legitimate. You need to back up every offer that you make with legitimate criteria, objective legitimate criteria. And so that objectivity comes from a third-party source that's respected by both sides. And because that makes your argument seem a lot more legitimate, because it's just not coming from you, because you are the enemy. Your goal is to persuade them otherwise.
Oh, man, you're getting me all kinds of excited right now, because I tell people they stress. Man, you have no idea. They stress. And someone is stressing right now, like, how much do I write it for? Do I write it for $1 million, $500,000, $400,000? I don't really know. And I often tell them, just write it. Please, just write a number, because it's going to change after you get the due diligence information back anyway. And that's but yet sometimes they still get stuck there. And I'm like, you're going to use and leverage the due diligence information as the reason why you're asking for whatever the new version of the offer is. And yet somehow that's still a sticking point, because I think maybe it's an American thing. We think when we write the offer, that's what we're agreeing to do right then at the beginning.
Right. Yeah, it's tough. And I think the majority of barriers that we face in negotiation are self-imposed. And we just need to, there's no science behind this. We just need to get over it and do better. So when you're writing that offer, your goal should be to come up with the highest number you can justify. And then similarly, if you're on the side where you're focusing on the defensive pillar, your goal is to write the lowest offer that you can justify, because you're changing the reference point of the negotiation. And the thing is, it seems so simple, but the thing is, humans are simple creatures, and we are persuaded by the simplest things. And so don't underestimate the power of anchoring, because it could be the biggest mistake you make in a negotiation, or the reason why you ended up with such a great deal.
Got it. Now, you wanted to go back and talk about negotiating at the mall, because I often follow that up with negotiating at Starbucks all the time, too. So
nice.
I would love to hear what you wanted to say about that.
Yes, and as somebody who negotiates at coffee shops as well, I am an advocate of what you're saying. And so here's the thing, and let's go back to Kwame before he became the negotiator guy. My weakness is that I like to be liked. I don't want to ruffle feathers. And so I realize that hurts me in negotiations, because I don't ask for what I want. I'm not as assertive as I should, and as I should be. And so one thing that I do that I encourage everybody to do is engage in what I call rejection therapy. And in rejection therapy, I regularly ask for things that I don't think I have any right to get. And so what this looks like is I go to a coffee shop and it's my birthday and they're like, hey, happy birthday. Here's a free pastry. And then this happened in September. I was there with one of my mentees and I said, hey, I'm here with my mentee. Can he get a free coffee too? Can he get a free pastry too? And they're like, yeah, sure. And so then on the receipt, it said miscellaneous discount,
Nice.
And so then I was like, all right, let's take this to the next level. And so for the podcast, I called Jim Tressel's office, the former coach of the Ohio State Buckeyes. And so now he's president of university. And I wanted to get him on to talk about leadership. And he said, yeah. And so now my last episode of the year is going to be with Jim Tressel talking about leadership. And so when you start to do this, you'll start to ask yourself, you're like, how many things have I missed out on simply because I didn't ask for what I wanted?
Yeah.
And the thing is, there are two effects when you engage in rejection therapy, and they're both good. The first thing is you might get a no. And if that happens, that's good because you come out on the other side of it breathing and you realize that it's not a bad thing to ask for what you want because you'll survive.
Right.
Second thing is you'll get what you want every once in a while, and that's pretty cool too.
Indeed. That's so funny. What I often train and tell people to do, especially when they're getting started with real estate, is I tell them to go to Starbucks and you can use this one because it's fun. Every retail establishment, almost all of them, they're trained to ask one question at the end. You know what that question is?
How can I make this better? Or how was your day? I don't know. Something like that.
Well, towards the end of is there anything else I can help you with?
Oh, right. Yeah, they do.
They ask that. So, and I often tell people, okay, all I want you to do is when the next time you hear that is go, yes, I'd like a 10% discount, please. And then smile and say nothing else.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Is there anything else I can help you with? Yes, I'd like a 10% discount, please. You would be floored with how many times you will get this everywhere. Just try it. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't need to be your birthday. It just happens and it works. So anyway, I get, you're going to get me all kinds of excited.
I'm definitely going to use that.
Yeah. You can send me, you put the savings in an account and then let's do some real estate. No, I'm just kidding. But you get my point. Cause it's just funny how we don't ask. And it's interestingly about something that you said that I have the same, I call it addiction, to wanting to be liked. And it's totally a detriment to, business and having to, learn that I would rather be respected than liked is one of those things that I think many of us have to grow through. So what would you suggest let's pretend that someone listening today is like, well, I'm not like Kwame. I'm not like Jay. I can't be out there and talking to people. And maybe they consider themselves an introvert. How on earth are they going to do this?
Yeah, it's tough. It takes practice, and you need to become comfortable with being uncomfortable for a time. Because the thing is, eventually you're going to break through and it's going to become normal. And so here's the thing. I'll give an example. I used to be terrified of public speaking. And so now I can go and do seminars and everything, no problem. But I could not do it in the past. So people would, I'm sure people in the audience in the past would look at me and be like, is Kwame trying to talk or is he crying? I can't tell. It looks almost the same. And so I was like, so what I ended up doing, again, it was a version of rejection therapy, but relying on my psych background, I realized this is a phobia. And one of the things that I can do to get over this is a technique called flooding. It's where you hyperexpose yourself to the thing that you're afraid of. And so what I ended up doing was every time I had the opportunity to speak, I would speak. I would do it as quickly as possible. The more fear I felt, the faster I would say yes. And so now, what's interesting, and this is an important point, in the past, when I would get up in front of people to speak, my heart would race, my throat would feel like, start to close. I would feel just, nervous. And now when I get up to speak, do you know how I feel?
Excited.
the exact same way, but I call it excited.
Yeah, that's why I said that.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
That's the thing. You just it's a change. It's a mental shift that you have to make. You reconceptualize the physiological response that you're getting and change it to something positive. I still feel the exact same way,
right?
But I call it excitement now.
That you and I seem to have had similar exercises. I didn't know there was a name for it. I just been telling people, look, you need to go to Toastmasters, and every time they ask you to speak, volunteer. And if you really want to get good, throw yourself into the competition portion where you have to keep speaking in front of thousands of strangers, and over time you'll figure it out. I didn't know it had a tech. I didn't know there was a name for this, but I'm like, cool. Now I can just tell them, go, yeah, all right. This has been like so helpful, because I think a lot of people believe, and I would love to hear your thoughts, that, salespeople or negotiators are born. But what you're really saying is, no, there's a process, and you can be made into one.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It happened to me. And now I'm doing these seminars, and as a negotiation consultant, I'm here negotiating on behalf of clients. I'm here walking people through this and doing it successfully. It was all learned. And that's the thing. If there's one thing that I want to get through today, it's the fact that negotiation isn't a talent, it's a skill, and skills can be developed when you take the time to hone them. And so what you'll find is the more competent you become in a certain area, the more confident you will become. And so you really need to delve deeply into this, because like I said, you're negotiating whether you want to or not. So you might as well try to be good at it.
Yeah, totally understood. And so for those that are listening, and I'm sure that there's a number who are still listening that want more information. I know you gave it to us earlier, but give it to us again. What's going to be the best way for them to track you down, find out more, how they can become a better negotiator, and just generally improve the skill set?
Yeah, so you could check me out on my podcast called Negotiation for Entrepreneurs. That's a great way, since you're already here on iTunes. Right. But one thing I like doing is getting people to contact me on LinkedIn. So 100% of the people who contact me on LinkedIn, I send a direct message to, because I want the content that I have on my podcast to be directly relevant and actionable to my listeners. And so I always ask what you want to hear, like what kind of things are you dealing with? So yeah, that's another good way to reach out to me. And then of course, if you want the prep guide, you can go to American Negotiation Institut.com and get those prep guides in the free resource section. But even if it's something where you want to connect with me because you have a negotiation you need help with, or you want coaching, I can do that as well too.
Excellent. So as we wind down here, I got a question for you, and this is kind of a negotiating that I know is happening to a lot of people. So I've got to ask you, a lot of people or would-be entrepreneurs let's pretend for a second that one of them is listening, and they're standing in front of the superhero outfit store, Kwame. They're thinking, this is the time. I'm going to pick out my tights and get my cape, and I'm going to go do this thing, right? That's what's going through their head. However, in the back of their head, they also have that voice. And I know you know that voice, and I know you know it well. And that voice, it's loud, and it's rarely supportive at the beginning. And in fact, for some people, they're related to that voice. How on earth do they get going? But more importantly, if you knew that they were going to actually do what you suggested, they were actually going to follow through, and they were going to do so in the next 24 to 48 hours, what would you have them do, sir?
As far as I would say, it would be rejection therapy. Go ask for something big. Put on those superhero tights and make that ask. Of course, prepare first, but don't use that preparation as an example, as a reason not to do it, because sometimes we can procrastinate through perfection, and that is the worst kind. But ultimately, it needs to result in some kind of action. Just make that step. Get the rejection, feel your pulse, check to make sure you're still there, and then fly off to the next negotiation and make it better.
Indeed. Well, I do want to say I definitely appreciate what you're doing, how you're bringing it to the marketplace, and letting us know that, hey, there's a place where we can go to become bigger, better, badder in this particular area. And I like what you're doing, sir. And thank you for sharing your knowledge, insight, and wisdom here with us today at the Cashflow Diary.
My pleasure.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what time it is. It's time for you to move at the speed of instruction. What does that mean today? It means American Negotiation Institut.com. Why? Because you know, like I know, that we said a lot of things today that was talking to the back of your head. And you're like, yes, that I'm having trouble. Yes, I want to get it. Yes, I want that deal. Well, guess what? Go ask for it. Go be prepared and go ask for it. And just for fun, why not ask for a 10% discount too? It's been fun talking to you guys today. I look forward to talking to you soon. Until next time.